For a limited time, you can get 30% more value from your American Express points whenever you transfer them over to British Airways Avios. Here's the thing that most people miss that could save you thousands of points and hundreds of dollars. Whenever there's a transfer bonus between British Airways or Qatar Airways and a bank like American Express, Chase, Citi, Capital One, etc., this isn't a single bonus to a single airline. In fact, it's a bonus to 5 different airline partners. And this means 5 times the number of deals becomes so much better to use your points for flights, especially for those coveted business class seats. I'm going to share with you my top Avio strategies so you know how to take advantage of this type of transfer bonus, plus some crucial tips on how to navigate them and make them work for you. But first, let's break some of this down. What is a transfer bonus? This is whenever you transfer your points from, let's say, American Express to a partner like British Airways, and let's say there's a 30% transfer bonus. This means you'll get 30% more points. So if you transfer 1,000 of your points, you'll get 1,300, and then if you transfer 100,000 points, you'll get 130,000 points. You just multiply the number of points that you're transferring by 1.3. Secondly, a key thing to understand is the points currency itself, which is called Avios. While you'll typically see a transfer bonus offered to British Airways and sometimes Qatar Airways from a bank, they aren't the only airlines that use this currency. Avios is the shared currency for a family of airlines. The other key members of this said family are Iberia, Finnair, and Aer Lingus. These make up the 5 main airlines that we're going to use with this transfer bonus. Third of all, here's the crucial detail that most people miss. Just because these airlines all use Avios doesn't mean they price flights the same. Each program has its own rules and its own deals, and this creates an incredible opportunity. You first send your points over to British Airways to capture that 30% bonus. From there, you're free to move those Avios to Iberia, Finnair, or Qatar to take advantage of their unique pricing. So you aren't locked into British Airways, you're bargain hunting on these other partners typically. So now that we know how this works, let's first cover what's at stake. What can you actually redeem these points for? But you're going to want to stick around because later on, I'm going to share some of the logistics and other need-to-know tips in order to make these reservations happen. So kicking us off, let's say you want to go to Spain. Iberia Airlines is based in Madrid, so you can find direct flights to Madrid and sometimes Barcelona for as low as 40,500 points one way. This pricing would be from the East Coast and on the off-season, and it can cost you up to 60,500 points one way from the West Coast during off-season as well. Now, these are already solid prices, but with a 30% transfer bonus, this range gets updated to as low as 32,000 points and as high as 47,000 points when booked on the off-season, which is not too shabby for a business class flight to Europe. Prices of these flights are based on distance and also have a peak and off-peak component to it. Here's a neat table that reflects the possible prices you can find. To find award availability, you can search directly on Iberia's website, but just a forewarning here, the website is a bit clunky. I have a video detailing on how I try to find flights a little bit easier linked up above. And now for this next deal, if you're interested in going to the very scenic Ireland, Aer Lingus has incredibly low deals in economy. You can find flights to Dublin from the East Coast for as low as 13,000 points, which with the transfer bonus will bring that down to just 10,000 one way. For business class flights, it would cost as high as 75,000 points from the West Coast during peak season, but divide that number by 1.3 to account for a 30% transfer bonus, and you get around 58,000 points one way, which again is not too bad for a business class flight. By the way, if you're curious on how you can know when these transfer bonuses are happening from American Express or any other bank to whichever transfer partner, then be sure to sign up for my newsletter. I'll keep you updated with transfer bonuses, all of the best promotions, important news, plus a weekly tip from me. Over 1,600 readers treasure it, and I know you will too. Link is in the description if you're interested. Then we've got Finnair, which their pricing to Europe is nothing incredibly fantastic, starting at 62,500 points one way, and then with the transfer bonus, that'll bring it down to just 48,000 points one way, which is again, great price, business class flight. And this is actually relatively smooth search on Finnair's website compared to others I mentioned in this video. The main perk to this redemption is simply that it's another destination in Europe at a good price. You can always catch another flight from Finland if that isn't your end destination. But now a quirk about Finnair is that sometimes you can theoretically unlock more availability if you change the country from the United States to Finland on their website and keep the language onto English and then search that way. And now truthfully, this is a quirk I heard about a while ago and it was true at that time. I'm not sure if they fixed it so it's more accurate kind of across the website, but it's better safe than sorry. And now a lesser known deal that you could take advantage of with Finnair is that you can actually book American Airlines flights and Alaska Airlines flights at some of the best prices for your American Express points. For example, you could fly on Alaska Airlines Airlines for as low as 11,000 points one way in economy within the continental United States, which is around 8,500 points with a transfer bonus. And you can fly on American Airlines to Hawaii on select routes for just 15,000 points one way, which is just under 12,000 points after the transfer bonus. Honestly, booking this is a bit more complicated though, and I dive into those details in a video linked up above for you. And then the final deal you could book using Finnair that I want to highlight here is that you could book Cathay Pacific flights for just 85,000 points to Asia from the United States in business class. With the transfer bonus, that's around 66,000 points one way. And this is awesome because it doesn't really matter the distance that you're flying, because these prices are based on the zone that you're flying from, aka the United States. To search for availability on Finnair's website, I would start with a search to Hong Kong, which is a Cathay Pacific hub, and then you can see if you can get to further destinations like Bangkok, Taipei, etc. once you know that award availability on the longer stretch is present. And the Qatar Airways is another one of the best partners you can use because it can get you far and it can get you there in style. Their Q Suites is one of the best business class products out there, and you can get it normally for 70,000 points, but with a 30% transfer bonus, you can get it as low as 54,000 points one way to Doha. But they're also very well connected in the world and can get you to further destinations in Asia and Africa or even Europe with a single connection. Prices you'll pay for that extra segment to South Africa, for example, would be around 95,000 points, which is just 74,000 points after the transfer bonus. You could search for availability on their website, which I don't love. My pro tip here would be to actually try to use their app for a little bit better user experience. I also share a faster way to find availability in the video linked up above for you. Additionally, Qatar has one of the best prices for domestic airline flights. You could book them on British Airways, but you'll often find them with better pricing on Qatar. The prices for these flights start at just 95,000 points one way, which is just over 7,000 points after the transfer bonus. This would be for like your shorter regional flights. Then it increases in price the further you fly. I show you how to find availability and book those in the video linked up above as well. And then British Airways itself, funny enough, isn't that impressive of an award program. They fly directly to London, which might be a convenient way to fly, but it's often not a terribly good deal. For instance, you could fly directly from Austin, Texas to London for just 90,000 points on an off-peak date, which is about 70,000 points with a bonus in business class, but you can book the same route on Cathay Pacific for 63,000 points and slightly less taxes as well. But of course, this is really only an option if you have points that transfer over to Cathay Pacific. And the worst thing about British Airways is that taxes and fees are often higher if you book through them. However, they're not always incredibly bad, but oftentimes they are. But it's weird because it's not consistently super high. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It's a very confusing program. But one deal with British Airways that actually is a great deal is flying to Japan on Japan Airlines business class. It will cost you between 77,250 points and 108,250 points, depending on where in the US you're flying, aka which coast you're flying from. But you see these prices, and at first they're a little bit meh, but then it turns into an okay price whenever you account for that 30% transfer bonus, making these flights cost around 60,000 and 84,000 points, depending on where you're flying from. Taxes for this flight would be around $200 one way. There are, of course, other airline programs you could book that same flight on, but British Airways Avios is an easy currency to earn. Now, before you step away from this video to start looking for these flights we talked about, here are some tips that will help you squeeze some extra value, also some traps to avoid. My first major tip here is to watch out for that segment pricing. So here's the trap. Most Avios partners price your tickets based on each individual flight segment. So if you book a flight from the US to Nice, France, and you plan on flying from the US to Madrid and then from Madrid to Nice, all on Iberia Airlines, you're going to pay that awesome price from the US to Madrid, but then you're also going to pay extra for that flight from Madrid to Nice. And that segment from Madrid to Nice may or may not be the best deal. So here's what I typically do before booking that journey together. First, I price out that main flight to Madrid, and then I start looking at what the price would be for that Madrid to Nice segment. I might actually find that I could pay for that segment much cheaper just using cash, or maybe even a different type of points, saving you a nice chunk of Avios. However, sometimes it really is the great deal that you think it is. My next tip here is a mindset shift that will unlock so many more deals for you, and that's mastering the positioning flight. First, you need to know which Avios partners fly from your home airport. For me here in Austin, British Airways, like I mentioned earlier, is all I got, which isn't the best deal. But I don't give up there. I can still take advantage of some of these other deals I mentioned. I just have to book a separate flight to another larger airport that has one of these deals available. This separate flight to position myself appropriately for this deal is called a positioning flight. For example, I might find an incredible deal on Qatar Q Suites, but it leads from Dallas DFW or New York, so I could drive or catch a quick economy flight to Dallas to get that sweeter deal. The small cost of that positioning flight compared to the outsized value of a luxury business class seat is often worth it. The more important question is, how do you actually find these routes easily? I use a free tool called flightconnections.com. You can just set a filter up by the airline like Qatar Airways or Aer Lingus, and they'll show you every single city they fly to and from. It's a game changer for planning these kinds of trips, and I'll link that for you down in the description. Okay, this next tip could literally save you hundreds of dollars on a single booking. You have to remember that every award ticket has two costs: the points cost and the cash that you pay for taxes and fees. But here's the rub: different Avios partners will charge wildly different cash fees for the exact same flight. I've had a hard time finding a predictable pattern here. I mentioned that British Airways often has higher fees, but sometimes they're perfectly reasonable. Just when I think I've figured out a rule, the next search will prove me wrong. So the quick takeaway here is that before you book, shop around on a couple of different Avios partner sites, and which partners you check might depend on which cancellation policy and the customer service team you prefer to work with when something goes wrong. And this leads me to my fourth tip, which is pay attention to those cancellation policies. To make it simple, I made a little table with the varying cancellation and change fees of these partners. Honestly, I couldn't find accurate information on the cancellation fees online for Aer Lingus. However, on the other hand, you definitely don't want to use Iberia Avios to book anything except Iberia flights. The critical warning is, if you do book a flight on a partner airline using Iberia Avios, you will likely forfeit all your points and taxes if you cancel that flight. This isn't true if you book an Iberia flight using Iberia Avios. However, even on their own flights, their customer service could be a little spotty. I had to cancel an Iberia flight not too long ago, and the cancellation process was fine over the phone, but it took me a little bit over a month to get my points back, and it didn't happen until I reached out to their customer service via Instagram. That's all fine and well now, so not a terribly big deal, just a little annoyance. So with that said, yes, you do want to pay attention to pricing, but if the taxes and fees are only slightly more compared to a more flexible partner, it might be worth it still. There you have it. Now you know the best deals to hunt for with your Avios. But knowing the deal is really only half the battle. You still need to know how to find the flight availability, and more importantly, how to transfer your points between these Avios airlines, getting unstuck if something goes wrong. I show you exactly how to find some of these flights and availability in this playlist here, or I share how you can transfer your points from one Avios partner to another in this video here. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video if it's been helpful. I'll see you in the next one.